Okay, so as I was saying, you guys get your resources, find your chat rooms, find your forums, and you'll be good to go. Now, I'm not sure exactly how you guys study or what methods you guys use. I'll be willing to, I'll be willing to listen and hear what you guys have to say about other methods. But this method, I believe over the years, my way of learning has evolved. It has evolved because before I didn't. I don't know. It was kind of sloppy before. It was random, and I wasn't making journals. I was still going to chat rooms, but it was a little bit different. I don't know. I just think I study a little bit differently now than before. So yeah, yeah. And as I was saying, I'll give you an example. Like I started learning Hmong last month. It was when was it? It was December 11th, I believe. It was December 10th or December 11th. So I've been studying Hmong intensively since that time. And now my level is, I'm not exactly sure. I would say intermediate, low intermediate level. I'm like low intermediate, intermediate level. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that when I go chat with Hmongs, I don't have to use English. Like everything I talk about, um, I try to use Hmong as much as possible. Sometimes I'll have to refer to a dictionary if I don't know a word, but yeah, other than that, without using the dictionary, yeah, I can converse pretty well in Hmong. And my 3 months is still going. My intensive study is still going. So I think maybe I may be able to get to an advanced level by the end of the 3 months, intense 3 month study. I was studying very hard, so I can read Hmong, I can write Hmong. I even know the Pa Ho letters, which is very rare. Not many Hmongs know that alphabet, that system. So I can read, write fluently. I know I can read, write fluently, and my speaking, I can speak pretty fluent. I still have some improvements to make, but I can speak Hmong. If you guys have kept track of my comments over on Hmong, I use all Hmong on my replies. All Hmong. I don't use English. I try to reply back in the language I study as much as possible, if I can. So that's just an example. I'm not tooting my horn. I don't mean to toot my horn, but just to give you guys an example uh, of you know, the hard work I put in for learning Hmong. So yeah, and you guys can do it too. I explain to people, they say, "Oh, how you learn so fast?" It's just putting in the time. Putting in the time, having the good resources, finding people to practice with. You do that. You diligent. You stay diligent doing that, then the results will show. You know, you don't necessarily have to go to the country to get to an intermediate, higher intermediate level. Now, I'm not saying that going to a different country to study foreign language is a bad thing. It's a very good thing. It will solidify your level. Like I said, when you go overseas to study, you should come back here, and when you speak to a native speaker, they should tell you that you're native. Like they should be able to tell you that you're a native speaker if you study in the country, especially if it's over a year or two. You should be native level. If you're serious about learning language, if you study hard, you should be native level. I mean, that's just being over in the country it will have a big effect on your level. But here, while you're in your own country, you can attain a high level. So don't let anyone discourage you and say, oh, you have to go over to the country. You're not going to be able to. You have to, you know, people try to discourage you, and they'll criticize your pronunciation or say you don't sound like a native speaker. They'll say you're not, oh, you sound like a foreigner when you speak, but like, well, it doesn't matter if you can get your point across to the native speaker. That's the most important thing, being understood. I mean, we don't want to speak sloppy. We want to, of course, have a pretty decent pronunciation, but it's pretty hard to attain that accent of a native speaker. You would have to. I think going over to the country will help you attain that accent. But even so, even if you can't attain the accent, so what? You can speak the language fluently. You can get your point across. Now, if I go over to China or somewhere and I get lost on the street, and I want to ask some questions, try to find my way around, they're not going to criticize my accent. You know, in that situation, it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to the situation. You know, if you communicate with them, that's the most important thing. That's the most important thing. So don't let anyone discourage you and tell you that, oh, you sound like an Englishman when you speak. So what? You know, so what? But like I was saying, you just find your resources, your forums, chat rooms, and find some music, podcasts. And as far as when you leave home, let's say if you go to a library, you may see some foreigners. You know, use the method I've used in the past. I still use it now when I have a chance. I'll walk up to a foreigner. If I know, like for example, if I know they're an Arab, they speak Arabic, I will walk up to them. I won't start speaking Arabic, but I will ask them the time, and then I'll ask them where they're from. And after I ask them where they're from, then I'll start speaking the language, because that way I know that they will understand. So that's a very good method. So if you're studying Chinese and you happen to be in a laundromat or in the library, anywhere, and you think they're Chinese, if you think they're Chinese, just be sure first. Ask them, go up to them, ask them the time. They tell you the time, and you ask them where they're from. If they're from China, then you start speaking Chinese to them, practice Chinese, and they will be surprised and they will be very happy to practice with you. Very happy. I've used that method so many times, so many times. So yeah, you got to keep yourself. Keep the language with you at all times. Even if you work, if you have a job, when you go to work, keep the language. If you're working at a gas station or anything with customer service, that's especially customer service is very, very good. I used to work at a gas station. I worked at several gas stations. When I worked at Kroger's, oh man, that's when I started learning Wolof. I was learning Wolof really, really fast, because we had so many Senegalese coming up there, and I would ask them. I would have my notebook and pen and write down phrases, and I would ask them how to say this, how to say that, how to say this, and every day I would see them and we would practice. Same with Russian. I did the same thing with Russian. I kept practicing with them, and I learned so much. And people didn't believe me. They said, well, no, I don't believe that you learned that much working at a gas station. How do you learn that much? How do you learn that much Russian? Because they asked me about the Russian. They said, how do you learn so much Russian? And I told them that I was working at a gas station. I had some good friends coming up there, and I was practicing with them. They helped me out, and most of them couldn't speak English, so it was hard for me. It's a bit hard for me. They spoke a little English, kind of broken, hard to understand, but they were able to help me out with Russian in the beginning. So I learned a lot of Russian when I worked at the gas station. I learned a lot of Russian. I learned a lot of Wolof. I learned a lot of Twi. What other languages I studied there? I think that was pretty much it. Mainly Russian and Wolof. I got a lot of practice with those languages. But let's see here. What else could I tell you guys? So it's so important to practice. It's so important to practice. So you want to make sure you find those chat rooms, find those forums, and practice what if you're studying, like for example, the first chapter, introductions. Learn how to introduce yourself. If it's all about introductions, go to the chat room. You should be able to introduce yourself well to the native speakers. You may have to switch to English for part-time, of course, because you're a beginner. Switch to English until you get better, so you have to use English. But that's how I do it. I go step by step. I start off with what's useful. I start off with like I was saying, in the chapters, you take what is useful and discard what's not useful. I don't want to learn things in the beginning. I don't want to learn about something random about trees or something, like talk about trees in the forest or something. That's irrelevant to what you need to know in the beginning. So basically those are my suggestions for learning the foreign language. Like I said, I'm not really good at explaining methods, but I hope it was beneficial for you guys. And if you have any questions, you can drop me an email and I'll be willing to answer them. But until next time, I'll see you guys around.